Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at Spunky Old Broad 1 or reach out to me on our website at spunkyoldbroad.com. And now, back to the show. Hi, this is Gayle Carson, and I'm back with Dr. Alexandra Stockwell, who is a physician turned relationship and intimacy expert. Um, Alexandra, let's get into the meat now of what happens when you're working with these couples. Where do we start the conversation about keeping passion alive in long-term relationships?
Okay, well, that really is the question. Where do we start the conversation? Because very often, this isn't true of everyone, but the majority of couples that I work with, they love one another, they are devoted to one another, they're not looking to split up, and they're typically, neither one of them is having an affair either, although occasionally they may or may not have children. They really have built a good life together, and from the outside, everything looks fine. No one thinks they're having difficulties. They're celebrating their anniversaries with a picture on Facebook, the whole thing. But then she will reach out, usually kind of tentatively, because either the sex isn't satisfying or more often it's just kind of wound down. So maybe they haven't had sex in 6 months, 2 years. Once it was 14 years. And they usually haven't really been talking about it. They've just been focusing on the things that are working and having more and more disconnection. And so I speak with her, and then I talk with both of them together before deciding whether or not to go ahead and work together and really transform all of this. And it's actually unusually common for her to say, yeah, we haven't had sex in, 8 months, whatever the case may be. And he kind of looks up and says, oh, has it been that long? So it's common that she's keeping track, and he, I think, just feels so challenged by the situation. He's kind of just put it out of his mind. So the first thing really is to bring honesty. It's why I really responded in the earlier show to your description of your husband as honest, because when we are holding back and not saying something, or in any way holding back, it's how you do anything is how you do everything. And if your mode is to hold back with the one you love as you're moving through daily life, there's no switch to suddenly turn it on and be able to bring all of yourself in a passionate way in the bedroom. We really need to be open and connected and sharing honestly the truth, the core of who we are in conversation in life, in order to be able to access it in the bedroom too. So the beginning of the work really is creating a culture of trust, honesty, vulnerability, and saying some of those things that haven't been said, and learning how to hear them and receive them without blame or judgment. And once a couple can achieve that level of intimacy and that flavor of intimacy, the majority of times they come back to a session and it turns out that they've been making love again. And then in another, let's say 20 to 25% of the time, we do actually focus on what is happening sensually, but very often just opening up the vulnerability changes everything.
Well, I was going to say, is there hesitancy on the part of people who come to you? Is it more the woman who wants to come and the man is kind of dragged along, or are they equally into getting this relationship going again?
I would say it's the woman who reaches out, and the man, to varying degrees, is dragged along. But I don't think that conveys the true story. Typically, he really cares, but as a man who's competent, accomplished, and really doesn't know what to do in this arena in order to make his woman happy and feel good himself, that he just doesn't find any other option but to shut down. It's not that he doesn't care, and ultimately it doesn't mean that he has lower sex drive. It's that his coping mechanism is to shut down. And for her, she's poured into raising children, whatever she's been doing, and feels like I've been taking care of everyone else, my husband, the household, working or not working, either way, I've been taking care of people, and I can't live this way anymore. It's time. So she has more fire and more direction, but very often, actually, she hasn't had hope, and then maybe she'll listen to this interview or read an article I've written, and something will catch her attention, and she'll start to think maybe there's hope. And that's the context for her reaching out. There are definitely people who go to lots of therapists and this and this and that, but those don't tend to be the people who find me. The people who find me have usually been just super competent in a lot of areas of their life and let this one go until they start this work.
Interesting. So where do baby boomers fit into this? What are their particular challenges in creating great relationships? Is it different for different, let's say, do you get more 20, 30-year-olds? Do you get more 50-year-olds? Do people come to you in their 70s? Well, tell me a little bit about baby boomers, the challenges, and the various age ranges.
Well, initially, it's less about the age and more about the length of the relationship. And when I initially started doing this work, people came who'd been together for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Interestingly now, I have people who want to figure it out so that they have a great relationship. And I actually currently am coaching two couples. One became engaged while working with me. They wanted to figure some things out before deciding whether to get engaged, and did that in the context of working with me. And another couple that they're not married either. But by and large, it's people who've been married a long time, and anywhere from, I want to say, 40 to 65, I would be honored and prepared to work with any couple or one individual in the couple in the 70s, 80s, 90s. It just hasn't yet happened. And I think that baby boomers absolutely have very unique challenges because, again, there's a real lack of education in how to have a magnificent, gratifying relationship. And baby boomers were brought up by parents living essentially a 1950s model, by and large. There always are exceptions, but generally speaking, after World War II, and the women who may have been working came home, and that was the model of the relationship. Father came home, mother made sure the house was clean and dinner was ready. Then the relationship model in society got turned upside down. 1960s, men with long hair, women much more professionally oriented, and a completely different relationship dynamic. Since the 90s, it's much more common that women are working, and there's an increasing number of women who are making more than their spouses, and that is also, while easy for you, complicated for many. And baby boomers at the time of life they're in, having given so much to their career and other people, this is the time for pleasure and enjoyment. And it is so challenging to know what should that be looking like, because it's confusing. What's the relationship model that really is going to serve us here? And I think while any individual may not describe it as confusion, baby boomers have this amazing opportunity. There's so much available, but it's really confusing to know which way to go for it.
So if someone wanted to improve their relationship, what's the one thing that they can do right now?
It's to really start dialogue with your beloved. And the way to do that is not just to get up the courage and then say the thing that's been on your heart for maybe 15 years and you've never said, but to really set things up for the conversation to be successful. So the first thing is to say to your spouse, I have something really important to talk with you about. Are you available to hear it now? I'd like your full attention. And really get a yes from the other person. Yes, I'm willing to have this conversation, and not kind of sneak it in the back door. Then the next thing is to say why you're sharing it and what your desired outcome is. And that way, if you want to say something that isn't working for you in the relationship, if you say what your desired outcome is, then instead of your spouse feeling blamed, attacked, inadequate, and becoming adversarial or shutting down, if you say what your desired outcome is, then the two of you can move towards that together. And I'll give an example. When I would ask my husband to do something differently, whether it was something intimate in the bedroom or even just, how he put the dishes away, really anything, when I would ask him to do it differently, he would feel criticized, rejected, and sometimes be motivated to do it, but often conclude, he would never be good enough for me to be happy. And once I started saying, I want to tell you this because I keep thinking about it, and my desired outcome is that I can clear the air and we can have a wonderful evening together. Then he's much more open, and I've been able to say much more complicated things, and we end up moving past it and really much more connected and more passion flowing.
That's interesting. I guess it's the same thing in a workplace or anywhere else. When someone gives you a helpful hint or, gives you a suggestion, you take it as a criticism rather than a helpful hint. And, it's just, I guess, human nature, the way people hear things and they interpret things. And of course, they always say the biggest problem that people have is communication, is that, you say one thing, I hear another. And I mean, it happens every day in all kinds of different things. And so it's really learning how to communicate and say the things you need to and say them in a way that the person doesn't take offense at it, because tone has a lot to do with it. What your face looks like when you're saying it, all of these things play into it. So what you're doing is very, very valuable. But what's the difference between what you do and therapy?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different kinds of therapy, and so I want to be really respectful and say that a therapist may not work in the way that I'm about to describe. But by and large, therapeutic training is to get at the question of why things are the way they are, and from there, hopefully shift them. And why really doesn't interest me at all. What interests me is how can things improve? And sometimes we need to go, look at a memory that comes up and blocks someone from making progress in the present moment. But I'm never really delving into the past unless it's showing up in the present. It's a much more goal-oriented process, and the process of having gratifying sensual interactions with your beloved, that's not goal-oriented. But the process of going from not having it to having it, absolutely, I'm focused on results.
Interesting. Yeah, not concentrating on why or what happened in the past, but let's solve the problem, which I agree with. I like that. And I understand you also have an online program. Is that right?
Yes, I have. Um, I have multiple programs. I have one actually, which I haven't told you about. I filmed it and it'll be available soon, which is really a kind of an appetizer. I think when it's edited, it'll be maybe 30, 45 minutes, called Conscious Partnership: Connect, Ignite, Create. And I also have an 8-week program, which is the same topic and going in much greater depth. And actually, maybe this is a good time to mention that anyone who wants to go to my website, you can put in your email address in order to access a document detailing the 6 qualities of conscious partnership. And you can read that and put your attention on one quality and then another and then another. And I feel very certain that there'll be some fresh energy in your relationship.
Well, you also have something that you're giving listeners, which is called Create Your Vision for Conscious Partnership. So people can go to your website, which is alexandrastockwell.com, and then you say /vision, and get this, because this will help them to really understand what you're talking about. And we'll talk more about that. Yeah.
I just want to add a topic that we haven't discussed yet, but it's very important. It's very easy to identify dissatisfaction and frustration. And when you're in the habit of doing that, it's actually difficult to identify what it is you really want. You're a woman who seems to know that, Dr. Carson, but by and large, women have difficulty actually identifying for themselves and naming what they want. And so the purpose of this gift that I'm offering is really to take the time with your beloved, with your partner, and craft a vision for your relationship so that you're both clear together on what you want. And once you identify what you want, you have a very good chance of having it.
A lot of this really, Alexandra, at least how I feel about it, is this is what you should be doing during what you want to call the courtship process. I mean, you should be doing a lot of talking. You should be doing a lot of, where do you want to go? What do you want out of life? What do you want this marriage to look like? What do you want the relationship to be? I think some people don't get down in the dirty with what they need to talk about. And I mean, going back to knowing what we want, when we were dating and he was really, hot to get married, and I said, look, when I finally decided to get married, which is a whole story in itself, which I won't go into, I said to him, that my career will always come first, you will come second, and the kids will come third, because I never thought I would have any children of my own. I mean, I just didn't have that desire. And he said, that's okay. He said, because the kids will come first, you will come second, because you will always be able to take care of yourself, and my career will come third. And we had the best marriage, putting each other second than most people who say they put each other first. But we knew what we were getting into, and we discussed it ahead of time. And as much as I knew he loved me and he wanted to get married, I mean, he knew that this was not going to be a traditional marriage. So I think it's what you talk about this whole time, that you're courting and dating and talking and doing, and not just concentrating on the superficial.
I completely agree, but there's one thing which I believe you take for granted, and that is that both you and your husband, to a very unusual and exciting degree, had a lot of self-awareness and self-knowledge. And I don't actually think that the majority of couples are really in a position to have that frank conversation because they don't have the requisite self-awareness. So many girls grow up with fantasies about being married and swept off their, all these kinds of things. And if someone's getting married in their 20s, let's say, even in their 30s, they have a fantasy about what it's going to be. And it's really as they come more into their 40s and have more awareness of who they really are and how they really want to live, that then that kind of a conversation can happen. But the relationship dynamics and the culture and the family have already been established. And I think that absolutely is a cause for the couples being in the situation that we've been talking about so many couples being in. So it's actually curious to me if you could have been so direct and straightforward about what your priorities were if you did that when you were 24, say. I mean, I don't actually know how old you were when you got married, but having put it off for so long.
Not too far away, 25. I was 25.
Okay.
but I guess as I said, we were both very, very fortunate, and it's amazing to me that in today's world, more young women in their 20s are not more aware because they're out working and they're out doing, and they should be. But we're coming to the end of the show, and I want to make sure people know how to get a hold of you, Alexandra, because I think you could be a very big help to many of our listeners. So your website itself is Alexandra, Alexandra Stockwell, STOCKWELL.com. AlexandraStockwell.com. You have something that you're offering to them, which is Create Your Vision for Conscious Partnership, which is AlexandraStockwell.com/vision. And you also have online training courses if they don't want to work with you personally or can't get to you personally. So what else should we let our listeners know about you and what you do?
Well, if you go to my website, one of the pages is contact, and you can reach out, and there's a drop-down menu, because basically once this appetizer course is edited and available, then I'll have that really available at a price point that anyone can access and try out who I am and going deeper. And then I have an 8-week virtual course, and the majority of what I do is custom private packages, coaching packages for couples. I call it the Soulmate Platinum Package. And if anyone is interested in that, it's a super deep dive that creates lasting transformation, and you will never slide back. I just want to throw in, there's this awful statistic that 85% of couples who go to traditional therapy end up getting divorced. That never happens when a couple has worked with me in this deeper way.
Oh, that's perfect. That's great. Well, we have about 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure that everybody takes advantage of your knowledge and your information. If people don't live where you are, do you conduct these sessions over Zoom or, on the internet, or how do you do that?
Yes, I do all of my sessions on Zoom, whether people live locally or I coach people all around the world. I currently have clients in Denmark. And I really love working on Zoom. I think people who don't have experience can be hesitant about intimate topics on Zoom, but I just want to say Zoom, it's even easier to use than Skype. You just press a link and that's it. And it's actually wonderful that you can be in the intimacy of your own home. There's no commuting time, no parking, no preamble, and we can go very deep. And anyone who's ever been hesitant about working on Zoom, they're not hesitant after they've done it a few times. Fabulous.
Well, my guest has been Dr. Alexandra Stockwell. She's a relationship and a person who can talk about intimacy with you. She's an expert in both of those fields, and I hope you've enjoyed the interview today. I certainly have. I've learned a lot, and I certainly hope you have too. Thank you so much for being with us, Alexandra. I'm sure our listeners really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carson. I'm so glad to reach other people, and to do it with someone who comes from such a great relationship is really a treat for me.